Well, we're coming down to the final day of our Juneteenth Commonwealth Conversation Series. Past, present, and future. What does Juneteenth mean to you, and where do we go in the future? It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you for joining us here on Stay in the Water as we broadcast on this beautiful, beautiful day in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in this great city of Norfolk on the campus of the Norfolk State University, broadcasting from the soul of VA Hot 91. We want to thank all of you for joining us and supporting us, as you always do here on State of the Water. Once again, we'd also like to thank our producer, DJ Scandalous, also known as Marvin Folks, which you can hear live every day from 2 to 6 p.m. here on Hot 91, the soul of VA. Look, I hope all of you enjoyed your weekend last weekend. Let me tell you, here in the DMV, it was a weekend to be remembered. First of all, it was Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Hopefully you had a great Father's Day. So we celebrate fathers every day here, and also mothers, because, again, they are the backbone of our families. Also, not only that, but we had Juneteenth on the same day as Father's Day. And as a tidbit of history, the very first Juneteenth actually was on Father's Day. I didn't know that. I learned that going through this process of educating myself even more so on Juneteenth. And we also had something in the water in D.C. Now, let me tell you, we're going to talk about this in the second half hour, but Pharrell did it again. One of 757's favorite sons, native sons, and also an honorary doctor of Norfolk State University, did it again in D.C. this time. Not just it was a great music festival, 3 days, but also forums. There were 4 forums at Something in the Water, and guess what? Norfolk State University was featured on 2 of them. Our great President Javon Adams-Gaston, and myself, and a phenomenal alum, a student, Jamie Turner. And I will tell you more about that in just a few moments in the second half hour. But let me tell you, Norfolk State is on the move. And, again, we want to thank Pharrell for all that he does for the 757 and the university. But here in the first half hour, we've got a phenomenal guest. Like I said before, last year we did a piece on Juneteenth, the day of. But this month, we're doing an entire series, the entire month of June, on Juneteenth, past, present, and future, right? Again, it's about telling the full story of history. And we've had rock stars in the area of history and individuals that are leading historical organizations that are important to our history past, but also now in the future, going in the future. And we're going to end the show, and I guess this series, with someone I think is the best person to end the series with, and that is the Executive Director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, none other than Christy Coleman. Ms. Coleman, thank you so much for joining us here on Stay in the Water.
Thank you, Dr. Claville. How you doing?
Well, look, I'm doing great. Again, like I said, we're coming off that high of last weekend, but it is phenomenal here in Hampton Roads. You know, one thing I always tell people that I love about this area, it's not just of course, the geographical location of it. We've got the water. We've got you can go 2 hours. You can get up in the mountains if you want, in the great hills of Virginia. But we've also got great history. Right? And like everywhere you walk here in Hampton Roads, it's like, oh, did you know that this happened here? Oh, did you know that such and such used to live here? Oh, did you know that this was the signing of this document here? I mean, we are in history, right?
Right.
So tell us about, first of all, you know, Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation. A lot of us, you know, have heard of it, but tell us about what Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation really is.
The Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation is actually an agency of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're a state institution that also has a private arm, to private boards that works with it. And the mission of the organization is to tell the story of the convergence of cultures that happened here. So Native Virginians, Europeans, and Central West Africans, and the legacies they bequeath to the nation. That is our mission. And so what we do is we operate Jamestown Settlement down in Williamsburg, and we operate the American Revolution Museum in Yorktown, Virginia.
Absolutely.
And with that, there's galleries, there's living history programs, there are lectures, and just all kinds of performances, and we do a variety of programming and events throughout the year, and we're open every day except for 3 days.
Wow. And Jamestown-Yorktown historically has, told a story of the settlers, and
right.
People during that time period, 1607. That's the big year, and
right.
what transpired during that time. But if I'm not mistaken, you're the first African American woman to actually lead as executive director. Is that correct?
That's correct. Second woman and the first African American.
Right.
Yeah.
And with that, there's been some constructive criticism about the story that's being told at that location. When accepting the position of executive director, and really that historic position that you're in, as a historical figure now, what was your mindset in saying, you know what, we've got to tell the whole story here?
Well, what was my mindset in accepting the job?
Right.
Well, let me start by saying that, anytime I go to an organization, I first look at the mission, and then I look at the opportunity, right? And as I saw it, Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, you're right. I mean, the story of the settlers, it's in the name, the Jamestown Settlement, right? But what was interesting about that is the fact that they were also, essentially from their beginning, also telling the story of Powhatan Indians there, and with a variety of approaches to that. And as time went on, and this mission, by the way, was changed long before I got there. It was, I guess, around 2007, right around the 400th anniversary, they began to look more carefully at the history. They, everyone had always known, whether it was at JYF or our neighbors at the National Park Service at the Jamestown Islands, where it's the actual site where the archaeology takes place to this day. There was also another part of the story that was foundational to America's beginnings. And so JYF, i.e. Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, made a commitment to begin to address that, both in terms of collections, and it was deemed, as they started thinking about their core exhibition and this new building that was going up, that's what they wanted to do. And so that like I said, some of that work had really begun before I got there. I think, one of the realities, too, is that, it for many, many years, JYF sort of marketed itself as history is fun, very hands-on approach, a desire to make sure that everyone felt welcome when they came. And so sometimes more difficult elements of that history were depicted in the gallery, but not necessarily in the living history areas, right? And that's still something that folks find challenging at times. But what I, over the 30 plus years that I've been doing museum work, that you begin to understand, and what I work towards is sort of a personal mantra that goes along with the mission of the organization, and that is, we'll never get right with each other unless we get our shared history right.
That's right.
And I also recognize that part of the challenge here is the way people use history.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, there's this thing called heritage, and these are the stories that we tell each other for cohesion, right? For cohesion. The idea is, how do we build community around a shared heritage? And that has we know what that has been for the majority of the nation, often did not include the stories of black folk or other people of color, or minimize their role. Certainly women were kind of, just home front stories, etc.
Right.
So there's this heritage piece. And then there's history. Now, history is the forensic. That is what is based on the evidence, whether that evidence comes out of the ground, whether it's in a written document, whether it's in oral histories, whether it's in DNA. There is evidence of what took place. And then there's this thing called memory, the experiences that we have that we add to it. And the examples that I give, and for your younger viewers, forgive me, I'll try to come up with an example that you can relate to as well. But, for example, if I were to tell the story of what happened on 9/11, right, when the towers fell or when the plane went into the Pentagon, from only my perspective, what I saw, what I experienced that day, that history of that event is very incomplete.
Wow.
Right? But we tend to take our personal memory to try to reinforce a heritage narrative.
Right.
And so what I try to do in my work is make sure that the forensic is actually helping to create new memory so that communities can choose to adjust that heritage narrative so that they understand, so that it can be actually usable history.
Right.
And so I saw that as an opportunity with JYF as well. And, it absolutely is something that is important to me and again, feeds back to a personal mantra that is also tied to the mission of this organization. Because frankly, if I don't believe in the mission, if I don't resonate with that mission of an organization, then I will not be successful, and I really don't need to work there. I mean, right. And I don't. I've never done that. I have had, over my career, I've had, organizations reach out to me wanting me to, consider being their CEOs, and I just could not. I just couldn't get myself excited about what their mission was. Yeah. Just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But in this case, the other let me add this piece is the other part is that, I grew up in this area. I grew up in Hampton Roads, so the history here is deeply important to me and deeply personal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the way that you broke it down, heritage versus history. And it's all about the narrative, right? Because, in simplest form, history is simply his or her story. So it's how you tell an event from your viewpoint. And so many times in our country, the history of the viewpoint of our country has been told from pretty much a whitewash lens. It's very, you got the time of slavery, the benevolent slave owner, that did right by his slaves and really didn't do anything unless they did something wrong first, and those false narratives. And that's got to really help to shape the negative pieces of how we view our history. So, as we talk about Juneteenth, Juneteenth is like that holiday. It's a holiday now, but it's that day that is so important to the fabric of America and so important to African Americans that many people to this day still don't know what it is, and for that, to me, that boggles the mind, because it was a major day, just like the Emancipation Proclamation and so forth and so on, that really helped shape who we are today. From a historian standpoint, from your standpoint, what is it about Juneteenth in the past that you think that that it helped? How did it help to shape us now?
All right. Well, let me start by saying this: is that part of the challenge here is that each black community had its own Liberation Day, Jubilation Day, or Emancipation Day. Here in Virginia, Emancipation Day was actually celebrated on April 4th, because that's the day that Richmond fell, and African Americans in Richmond and throughout Virginia were now free because it was under federal control.
Right.
In South Carolina, it's a different date. In Georgia, it was a different date that African Americans celebrated. Juneteenth the significance of Juneteenth is to paraphrase the late great Fannie Lou Hamer, is that none are free until all are free. So the word that the folks down there in Galveston it wasn't that they didn't get word, is that the Union Army wasn't there yet to enforce that freedom, right? So when it happens, because believe me, I mean, when the Emancipation Proclamation came out and became published in September of 1862, became effective, they gave the South 100 days to get themselves together. Right. Of course, the South rejected it, and not only, but the language was very specific in terms of, those who reach Union lines. Union lines weren't in Texas yet. So the significance of General Granger rolling up on the plantation in Galveston and saying, look, you're free. Here's the decree from the Emancipation Proclamation. This is the expectation of you, in this freedom, and that's it, right? I mean, this happens. And so for Texans, and the history of this does begin to spread around the country, but it's only, I would say, probably only been in the last maybe 20 years or so that the rest of Black America in particular began to know. And as you stated, for some, they didn't know about Juneteenth until the last couple of years. Right. and so, why is that? And there are a lot of answers to that question, I think. But, the biggest part is that the biggest part of that I would suggest is that they either considered it a localized celebration, like a Mardi Gras, or that it wasn't part of this larger American narrative of the push to make this country's ideals real. Yes, that mix between our ideals and what is actually happening in practice. You can't be, all men are created equal and coexist with this institution and the institutions that follow that denies that very fact. And so what ends up happening is you minimize the contributions of those people, because Black folks weren't just sitting around waiting for freedom to come. They were active in defying this system of enslavement when the first Africans landed on the shores at Jamestown, right? I mean, the freedom struggle has always been there. The challenge of unequalness has always been there. Didn't require any agitators. There's an African proverb about, you keep the dog locked up in a gate, and as soon as the gate is open, they run out, because even a dog knows what freedom means.
That's right.
Right? So,
absolutely.
Anyway.
This is Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Right now, you're joining us for our last installment of our Commonwealth Conversation series of Juneteenth. Joining us, we have Executive Director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, historian Christy Coleman, where we're talking about Juneteenth, past, present, and future. Ms. Coleman, you mentioned, localized celebrations. And I remember growing up, we used to have Juneteenth programs, right? In our city, which is, of course, in northern Louisiana, we would have Juneteenth parades. And still to this day, there's like a Juneteenth celebration downtown. It's a huge celebration, right? And different churches would have it. Like you said, it was a localized celebration. And I guess being so close to Texas, it had a lot of relevance to us. But, when I talk about persons not knowing about Juneteenth, I'm also talking about, more specifically, not just African Americans, but all of America. They're like, what is Juneteenth? Of course, everyone knows the Emancipation Proclamation. And I say that tongue in cheek because I'm assuming everybody knows about the Emancipation Proclamation, right? Of course, growing up, I don't know about you, but in my history book, it's talked about maybe 1 or 2 pages about slavery. Second page, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, then Booker T. Washington. Yeah. Next page, and then Martin Luther King. And then as my kids grew up, they had another page added for Barack Obama. So, we had about maybe 10 pages of history during that time period that I can remember. And we supplemented it with Black History Month, right? Which really started Carter G. Woodson, Black History Day.
Yep.
And then it became a full month.
A week, and then it became a month.
That's right. A week, then a month. So, and now there's this movement of 360, Black History 365, right? One of my good friends and colleagues, former chaplain for the Washington Bullets, Dr. Joel Freeman, is working. He worked with a historian and to create this curriculum in this book called Black History 365, which highlights Black history every day, right? Taking each day and a significant part of history for African Americans. But as we talk about Juneteenth in the now, how do you believe that we're doing in, giving recognition and interpreting Juneteenth? We know what it was in the past from a historian standpoint, but today is a federal holiday. Only 19 states actually recognize it as a state holiday. Of course, the Commonwealth of Virginia is one of them. How do you think we're doing? Loaded question.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was the year of the Juneteenth ice cream and the salad, right? I mean, it was kind of nuts watching corporate America stumble over itself trying to figure out how to commemorate and commercialize
how to make money.
Event. I think the lessons is in how not only Texans and Louisianans and others celebrated it in the past. I mean, it was absolutely a recognition of freedom. It was highlighting accomplishment. It was family gathering is the biggest part of that. And that is critically important because the institution of slavery did everything it could to disrupt Black families. And so instead what happens, even though it wasn't legal for enslaved people to marry, you couldn't often name your own children. You couldn't help guide your children in terms of what they would do and be in their lives. All of those decisions that are so sacrosanct to family structure was disrupted by enslavement, right? But even that being said, our people are a resilient people, right? And so even if the law said you weren't married, these folks recognized their marriage. They knew who their children were. They knew who their aunties were. They knew who they had formed those kinships with, whether they were blood kinships or whether they were heart kinships. And so when slavery is abolished, one of the first things Black people do is go and find their family members that have been separated from them. So to me, Juneteenth is also about family and kinship. And so if what I would hope is that, and we saw some of this, it was programming around we saw, whether it was in churches or parks, or we saw this mix of activity that was taking place, particularly in the last 2 years across the country, as families were coming together, as parades and celebrations were taking place, concerts, performances, historical readings. I mean, there is this powerful mix of, yes, us too, I too am America, which I think is a pretty powerful thing if we could stay focused in that space. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And when we talk about family and focus, like a lot of the events in this area, the City of Newport News, which I participated with the vice mayor, colleague, and good friend of mine, Dr. Sandra Cherry, had a vision to take it from 1 day to now 10 days of events. So, and hopefully it becomes a full month. And a lot of it was family centered. And also here in Portsmouth, they had a day that they had, family fun and events out there where our radio station Hot 81 partnered with the Urban League and other entities to offer just that. When you talk about understanding family, I think Juneteenth for me is an opportunity just to do that, to kind of take a pause, to look back and look kind of like where we've come from, but not just that, but to celebrate where we've come from. You know, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to say, you know, we're not doing this or not doing that, or our country's not doing this, not doing that. But we've done a lot in a short period of time. And I think that we got a lot to do. Don't get me wrong. But I think that sometimes we just need to step back and say, wow, thank God for where we came from and what we've accomplished. And
agreed, especially given the fact that at every step towards that goal, right, every step towards that wholeness, every step towards contribution, every step towards advancement, whether it's economic, social, or what have you, that there have been forces that have worked tirelessly to prevent it. So even when freedom came, you had people literally trying to figure out, how do we re-enslave? What systems can we put in place, or what things can we do to control black bodies?
Absolutely.
And so, early in, you get convict leasing. Oh, if you're not working for a white person, then you're considered a vagrant. We're going to lock you up and we're going to put you into, a prison system. Or, and even with that, during Reconstruction, which America has painted as a failure, when really Reconstruction was making the promise real.
Yes.
And what we saw was an extraordinary expansion of rights that didn't just impact African Americans, but immigrant communities who had also been born here. Some white men who had never been a part of the franchise were allowed to do so because of Reconstruction and so forth. And then we have this significant backlash that happens when Reconstruction is abandoned, that is called Jim Crow. And we move from Jim Crow into segregation, where whole communities are bulldozed to put in interstate highways, black communities, right, to disrupt. There's always been this disruption, and yet African Americans persist and continue to fight towards the ideal that has been set forth.
Yes.
In the founding of this nation, even if the founding of the nation didn't include us. And I think that is worthy of commemoration. I think that is worthy of celebrating that we persist and others have persisted and allies have stepped forward over time and to be a part of this progress of making America whole. And so, I think those of us that work in public history, those of us that work in museums and, work at the universities and all of that, while, we work to make sure that the story of America is a complete one, and it can't be complete if it doesn't have all of our voices, if it doesn't have in it those moments of great tribulation, but also great triumph of the human spirit. I think those are the lessons that we can latch on to help us navigate present and future issues, but we have to be honest about it.
Absolutely.
It's like, you can love a drunk uncle, right? But let's not pretend he's not an alcoholic and that addiction may be a part of our family cycle. Yeah. And if we want to break that cycle, we got to confront it.
Awesome.
Doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means we got to confront it so we can get better.
I actually
and that's how I how I like to sometimes think about it. Ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. Ignoring the legacies of the harm that may have been caused doesn't make it go away.
That's right. You know what? I love it. Understanding real history, but being honest about it, including all forces. This is Executive Director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, Christy Coleman. Thank you so much for joining us here on State of the Water. For those that are listening, we'll be right back in just a moment to discuss this beautiful weekend of Something in the Water. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us here as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University from the radio station of WNSB Hot 91, the soul of BA. We had a phenomenal conversation in the first half hour with the executive director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, Christy Coleman, as we close out this month of Commonwealth Conversation series talking about Juneteenth. And again, understanding past, present, and future. what did it mean in the past? What are we doing now? And how we're going to get there in the future? What does the future look like? And she was the perfect person to wrap it up, that segment. And, I'm excited for next year as we do this again, because it's only going to get better. It's a federal holiday finally. 19 states, recognize it. And, WNSB participated in one celebration in Portsmouth, and I did another one, a debate for the city of Newport News, and our producer Marvin Folks, he was part of that out there in Portsmouth. What was how did you feel? What was the energy like out there in Portsmouth on Juneteenth, Marvin?
It was phenomenal, and it was very much needed for the city of Portsmouth, especially with a lot of the violence that's been taking place there lately. The energy was great. The people were great. The food was great. And it was just a really, really great celebration. It was right there on the water, and you got to see, the ships and everything that were out there. And just, I went on stage and I introduced Blackstreet and, told a little story about, some of the mentorship I went through being around them when I was a teenager. And I also had a chance to just represent for Norfolk State University. As I looked down to the crowd, I said, it's Juneteenth. And I'm sure there are a lot of HBCU students and alumni out here, and I just had to say that, behold the green and gold, and the crowd was just chanting it with me. And there were some Hampton University students and alumni out there, and it was a really great experience for blacks and representing for all that we've been through and how far that we've come. So
absolutely. Behold the green and gold.
That's right.
The Spartan Nation always represent.
Always. All the ways.
You talk about your time and mentorship as a teenager with Blackstreet. I don't think a lot of people really know, but Marvin Folks was also known as Scandalous as a recording artist. And, he had a big album back in the day, not too long ago. And his mentorship came under one of the top producers in the industry, or actually all time. In the world, absolutely. Teddy Riley.
Yes.
And Blackstreet, he worked directly with them as one of Teddy Riley's, I want to say it was his third group, because this guy, he had Rex in Effect, and then...
It would technically be fourth, because Ted started in a group as a kid just like me, and it was called Kids at Work.
Okay.
When he was like 12 or 13 or so.
Okay.
And then Guy, then Rex in Effects, and Blackstreet all at the same time.
Wow.
Yep.
Again, I mention those names and people just get like you go back in eras. You remember Guy album, Let's Chill. You remember that. You remember Rex in Effect, Virginia Beach, video scene, which started, that type of R&B smooth out over, hip hop smooth out over R&B tip. Some of that BBD started, right?
Yep.
Bell Biv DeVoe. And then, of course, the iconic songs of Blackstreet, Before I Let You Go, right? But you were there. It's not like this is something that we live in moments, but you were in the room.
Yes, I experienced that. I first met Teddy 2001. I used to sweep hair at a barbershop called Precision Cuts in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
And the owner of the barbershop was also Teddy's barber, along with the rest of Blackstreet. So while I was there sweeping hair, he would come celebrities typically get their hair cut like every couple of days. So he was there quite often.
Wow.
He found out that I made music, and he found out I'm not just a rapper, I'm also a producer. I play keys. So he found out that I produced, and he just took me under his wing, and we recorded a few songs with him. I was in a rap group. I started off in a rap group called the Road Runners, and he produced some songs for us. And then in the midst of him producing songs for us, he also mentored me just as a producer, the same way he did with Pharrell when he first met Pharrell when he was in high school. Because Princess Anne High School, where Pharrell went, was right across, maybe a 5-minute walk from his high school, from Princess Anne to Future Records recording studio on Virginia Beach Boulevard. Wow. So it was a great experience. Although he wasn't there for this, celebration, it was Levi Little, Chauncey Black, Mark Middleton, and Eric Williams. These guys, I worked with all of them in the studio, and it was great to be able to give back. I told Chauncey this the day afterwards. We spoke on the phone, and I said, man, it was just an honor to be able to give back to you guys because y'all inspired me so much. And I always said, man, if whatever I could do to help someone out, to help me when I was younger, I always wanted to be able to do that. So to be able to introduce them in front of a crowd of people and tell just a short story, to solidify, why they should be honored in Virginia. You know, they got the keys to the city in Virginia Beach. They didn't get the keys to the city of Portsmouth, but they made it the official Blackstreet Day for June 19, 2022.
Wow.
So, you know, just to solidify, you know, why these guys are great for the community, and, you know, we should be sure to support them.
Absolutely. You know, and I talk about the 757. You know, of course, Hampton Roads, from a historical standpoint, talking with Christy Coleman in the first half hour, why I love the area. You know, it's so much history. I love history. You know, and of course, at Norfolk State, I'm able to do everything that I love, law, policy, history, you know, and not only that, but also, as we call it, the 757, right? It's so much talent in the 757, both athletically and musically, right? And we just talked about yourself, we talked about Teddy Riley, we talked about Blackstreet, you know, all, if not Virginia Beach 757 born, but definitely reared. Like Teddy, Teddy came down, he's been here pretty much most of his life, you know, in Virginia Beach. But also, we talk about, you know, one of 757's favorite sons, and now songwriter Hall of Famer Pharrell Williams.
That's right.
Or as we call it, Dr. Pharrell Williams, who's an honorary doctorate here from the Norfolk State University. And what he's doing, you talk about giving back, right? But what he's doing now in his home state, more specifically, wanted to do in his home city, right, Virginia Beach, but really has adopted Norfolk and really Norfolk State University, which is his university, right, because of the influence of the band on his career. You know, what he's doing and giving back with something in the water, I mean, it's mind-blowing, you know. You know, for me, Scandalous, when I think about something in the water, I think about Essence Fest, right? How that is a part of a staple of New Orleans now, you know, my home state. How that's a staple of Essence and what they do. Essence Magazine, that whole empire. But when you think of something in the water, first of all, when it first hit, 2018, I mean.
Major.
Yeah.
It was major. And even Teddy was really excited.
Wow.
He was really, really excited. I did a mix here on air, and I tagged him in it because I mixed a couple of the records that he produced for Michael Jackson. Then he took my post and he reposted it on his Instagram, and he said, I see everybody as something in the water. He came here, and then we went to MacArthur Mall, and we ate at California Pizza. What's it called?
Yeah, California Pizza House.
Yeah, California Pizza. We ate there, and then we went bowling. He loves to go bowling. Anybody that has ever been around Teddy, you know that he loves to bowl. And he was just really excited. He did a great job at Something in the Water. He brought out Coco, because Coco from SWV is also from New York, like Teddy, but she's another one that migrated here to Virginia, and she still lives here. He brought out Lil Duval. So Something in the Water was really, really a great experience. And you know, I'm just happy that it happened here. And Pharrell just really outdid himself that year.
I'm telling you. But not just that year, right? But also when we talk about, you know, what he did. And matter of fact, I just want to give a quick note to the connection here with SWV. So with SWV, their very first video week, right? It was back in the early 90s. They shot it and they had a boxing scene, right? So the guys in the video was actually homeboys from my neighborhood.
Wow.
Back in Louisiana.
What?
You know, who went out to L.A. They had a group, then they went out to L.A. They wanted to break it to the music scene. You know how it go.
Yeah.
So when Week came out, we were like, man, that's Corey.
What?
You know, exactly. So, you know. It
Full
was,
circle.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then it's interesting because I was at a forum for lady business entrepreneurs, and Coco's one of her, who became her best friend, was there. And I went up to her. I said, you know, tell her, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, my homeboy was in the video. So we were like, it was just one of those things like, oh, wow, you know, this connection, that connection. But it's good. It shows you, you know, 6 degrees of separation of a small world. But I just want to get that quick note. But when we talk about Something in the Water, giving back and doing big things, it was not just the music, right? But it was also the empowerment forums, you know, that he had. You know, the first, it was held at the convention center, and it was the first things that people kind of went to, but it was the music that kind of took it over. But Scanners, what I saw evolve from that was that because of the backlash, unfortunately, from a few individuals in Virginia Beach, not everybody, it's just a few major individuals that are decision makers, it costs, I saw Pharrell, it cost him to push into a direction of being an activist, and really keying in on some major social issues and say, wait a minute, I can use my talents, my gifts for a bigger purpose because we need to address this stuff, and one of the things that was a precursor of it was Elephant in the Room, which was last year, Norfolk State University held on our campus, was the host site. He ended up bringing about $12 to $13 trillion of represented equity on stage, on campus here at Norfolk State, HBCU, and businessmen across the 757 that looked up on stage and was like, the game has changed.
That was a major impact.
You were there.
I'm so honored to have been there and witnessed that. You spoke very, very well. Just the topics, we need that balance in entertainment. I know everyone looks up to Pharrell as just entertainment, but like you said, now getting into activism, that's going to put him on another level that we need. We need as black people. We need that. So that's great.
Not just as black people, but we need it as a society.
As society, yes. Let's get that clear. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because, you hear some of the same voices all the time, right?
Yes.
They come out, and of course, we need those voices. Don't get me wrong. We need those voices. But sometimes those voices become silent. Even though they're talking, you don't hear them because they're talking about the same stuff.
Over and over again.
And nothing seems to be changing at the rate that it needs to change. And I want to make sure people understand things are changing. And I understand public policy and the process that it goes through to change. But it's not changing at the rate that we need things to change. In society today, things happen like that. Just like now. If you miss a moment, if you don't post, if you don't respond.
It didn't happen.
Right. Exactly.
It didn't happen.
No matter how many pictures you got on your phone, no matter how many stories you got in your head, it didn't happen. So we need individuals to make change now. Right? And that's something that I saw him do. Now, like you said, you were there. I was fortunate enough to be appointed by our president to actually help to coordinate that event here on campus between Pharrell's group and Norfolk State. And let me tell you, it was a labor of love, but when it came together, I was blown away. It's just like the impact. Of course, the presentation was great. Saying I'm not a person that's like very starry-eyed, right? So, get shocked by people and individuals of note and so forth. Don't get me wrong, I got my favorites. We all got our favorites, right? But at the same time, what blew me away was how it came together and that message that hit home. And this year was no different, right? So we know the pandemic happened, some in the water didn't happen, right? And then we know that it was this big issue between Virginia Beach, and they didn't want it, right? Now, the businessmen wanted it, but it was just, like I said, those small individuals that didn't want it. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, this was major, right? Those 3 days, you had 100,000 people on the beachfront and no major incidents of violence, right?
$20+ million.
In one weekend. That they were not expecting. It was actually 32 million. 32 million that they weren't expecting. I mean, to me, that's a good weekend, right?
That's a phenomenal weekend. 32 million? What?
Right. That you did not expect. But with that, then the question was, where is it going to be in 2022? It was this big question. Where is it going to be? Where is it going to be? And guess what? When it was announced, D.C., that's where we're going to have it. And I want to tell you about what happened there. But very quickly, this is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Again, thank you for joining us for our final segment of our Commonwealth Conversation series, where we talked about Juneteenth, past, present, and future in the first half hour. But now we're talking about the impact. When we talk about the future of Juneteenth, we're talking about what happened with Something in the Water last weekend in D.C. with 757's favorite son, Pharrell Williams, and the impact that we had with Norfolk State University. So, scandalous. Last weekend, I was fortunate enough to travel with our president, Dr. Vagina Adams-Gaston, and her husband, to Washington, D.C., where we went to the St. Regis Hotel, right there on Black Lives Matter Plaza.
Wow.
So you walk in, Black Lives Matter, you look to your right, there's the White House right there, right? So we go into this historic hotel, phenomenal hotel. Accommodations were outstanding. We get there, and there, we had worked to have, Pharrell wanted to have 5 forums, right? And those 5 forums were going to address, again, these were what's called power forums. They were addressing the power of curiosity, youth at the center, preparing students for life after high school, black student debt crisis, elephant in the room, and then overtone, go-go, right? So out of these panels, Norfolk State University was featured on 2 of them. And those 2 were the black student debt crisis, and then the second was elephant in the room. I want to start from the bottom up. Let me talk about elephant in the room. So it was announced that elephant in the room, at that forum, elephant in the room is going to be in Norfolk 2022 in the city of Norfolk, but it's expanding to the city, but it's also going to be on the campus of Norfolk State University. We are the host site for the culmination of elephant in the room. As a matter of fact, not only are we the host site for elephant in the room, the culmination of it, but it's going to be here every year.
Amazing. Give a round of applause for that right there, man. Yes.
It was again, being able to be a part of this. Now, I'm speaking of, you were talking about the history with Blackstreet and Teddy Riley being a part of the history, being in the room. I've been in the room from the very beginning. And to see it, I'm just like, I'm scratching my head, like I'm pinching myself. Again, not starstruck, but just struck by the impact that this thing is having, right? These movements are having. So when we take a look at this, when you talk about 13 trillion on stage, now you're bringing that amount and more to the city of Norfolk. Again, Virginia Beach is missing out once again. But what's happening now is on that stage, we had Shadrick Wilson, who is, of course, Virginia Beach native. She was here. Ryan Shadrick Wilson. She was here during the original Elephant in the Room. Also, Pharrell was on stage. You have 5 black CEOs and COOs, CIOs of Fortune 500 companies. You had Marriott. You had J.P. Morgan Chase. You had the representative of Black Tech for Google. All right. You also had representative from UPS, and you also had a representative from Elderman Company, North America, right? And then on stage with them, you had our president, Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston, where they talked about the power of investing in black communities. And Dr. J talked about the power of investing in HBCUs. And what she talked about is basically the impact of when you give and invest in HBCUs, which are historically in black communities, like we are, Norfolk State, in the middle of one of the most historic black communities of the city of Norfolk, of Hampton Roads. Absolutely. We're here. What impact do we have if you invest in Norfolk State? How does that now trickle out into the community? But not just that, but also our students. You realize if a student that graduates from HBCU with a college degree has an earning power of an additional $1 million from a person that doesn't.
Wow.
And we think about that. That's life-changing. That's generation-changing, right? And let me tell you the other part of it. So we had those companies saying, we're getting ready to invest in black communities. We're getting ready to invest in HBCUs. We're getting ready to invest in, this movement that Pharrell is giving light to. And I remember, I'll tell you this. So I got a phone call because he and a shout out to Robbie Wells. Robbie Wells is his right hand, and we work together to coordinate these things. He on behalf of Pharrell, myself on behalf of Dr. J. And they were like, hey, we're getting ready to meet with J.P. Morgan Chase. Did Norfolk State get some money from them? It's like, no, we haven't. It's like, All right, so things are going to happen, right?
Let's make that happen.
Right. So it's things like that's moving, right? And what's happening is that we're being used as the example of moving forward, And to me, that's humbling, right? You think about it. 757, Norfolk State University.
And we're one of the younger HBCUs.
Absolutely. We're not even 100 years old yet.
No.
But 2035, we're going to be 100 years old.
That's right.
So that's amazing within itself. But so she spoke, and it was so powerful because they were like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that these things existed. So that ended. But before that panel, we had the panel that's getting all the attention now in media. And that's the Black student debt crisis, right? So the Black student debt crisis, I was fortunate enough to be a co-moderator of that particular panel, also led by the director of engagement, Stephanie, who's with Yellow, Pharrell's organization and group. And with that, we had 5 students from leaders from the NACP, HBCU President's Group. We also had the National Student Engagement Director, Wisdom Cole, who came on stage to give a speech about what the NACP is doing and what President Biden needs to do, right? Basically live up to his promise on campaign day, right? Eliminate student loan debt, yes. at least 10,000, right?
I can
that
use
you said you were doing, right? And we also had the winner of Black Ambition, who was also there. A phenomenal student, graduate of Hampton University, who actually I taught her 2 roommates. So she remembered me from that. So, and then one of our former students, Jamie Turner, one of my former students in the Department of Political Science, was also on stage representing Norfolk State University as an NACP student leader. So you had Howard represented North Carolina A&T, FAMU, and Southern University, my alma mater in Norfolk State. So out of all those 6 universities represented, and I'm pinching myself, I basically taught at all 3 of those, three of the 6, right?
Wow. And
had students that I influenced that were there. So I was like, okay, it's
making an impact.
It's making an impact.
It's working.
So at the end of it, I talked about the issue and the impact of student loan debt on black students, but just students in general, but more specifically HBCU students, because of the amount of debt that they have to carry to attend, because of the lack of resources that families have, because of historical discriminatory practices, right? So it's a snowball. And we had each student talk about their struggle with student loan debt that they had to endure or are enduring post-graduation. So this is what happened. And this is what's getting all the publicity out there. At the end of them talking about their struggle, and they were, let me tell you, someone was in tears, right? It was heavy on them. They didn't cry, but it was heavy. Pharrell paid off their student loan debt.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
That's a huge weight off of your shoulder. Because, people always say, well, why do you go to school to spend all that money and then potentially don't even get a job in your field, or this and that and this and that? Well, at least they won't have to worry about that. And I'm sure that those students are going to get a career in their field, and now their student loan debt is paid for. Shouts out to Pharrell Williams for that one.
Absolutely. And we're talking about impact, right? That's an immediate impact, because the best thing you can invest in is education. And we got some issues with, making sure that education is the right price, pricing education in the right area for students, and making sure that there's enough financial aid out there for students to where they're not saddled with this debt, so that students don't have to work multiple jobs, make decisions they shouldn't have to make, and all of those things, right? And of course, personal finance, personal budgeting, all those things work together. But at the end of the day, when he said that, you should have saw the faces of those students, right? They were like, wait a minute, did you just say what I thought you said? Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, one student was like, am I included in this? Like, you're on stage, right? And
is this real?
Exactly. That was the question they asked. Yeah, and when Stephanie told them it's real, they just started. You saw the tears rolling down their eyes. And male, female, they were all crying, right? And what ended up happening was they asked what are you going to do now with this newfound freedom? And our student, Jamie Turner, alumni of Norfolk State University, Department of Political Science, said, I'm going to law school, and she not only said that because that's her dream, but she couldn't afford it because she had all this student loan debt. But now she's able to do it. But not only that, but she said, I'm also giving back. She didn't stop. She said, I'm giving back. She said, I'm giving back to my department, my university, Norfolk State University, and my department, the Department of Political Science, to start something to help other students to get to that next level where I am. I mean, that's what it's all about. Pharrell made the immediate impact, changing generations, right? Not just those people. Instantly, generations. And let me tell you how it really was. When we got back to the green room and got off stage, they were like, "Okay, give me your account number and your latest statement." Right?
Right then and there.
Right then and there.
Wow.
He's backstage to greet him, and he's got pictures. We've got pictures that they're talking to the students and so forth. If you go to our website, www.nsu.edu, go to our social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, you'll see the story that's posted about Dr. J and myself at Something in the Water in D.C. You'll see the story that's posted by our alum, Jamie Turner. She did a story on LinkedIn, just 5 paragraphs about her. It's entitled, I'm Debt Free. Do you know in less than 24 hours it had over 15,000 impressions, reactions, over 300 comments that went worldwide, right? Not only that, it's got over 20,000 to this day, and it's constantly getting reactions. That's just a student who became debt-free that picked up her phone, went to her LinkedIn account, and wrote her 5 paragraphs about how this is impacting her. And Norfolk State is tagged in that. Behold the Green and Gold is hashtagged in that. Myself, Pharrell is hashtagging that. And the university and Pharrell are now getting this additional exposure because of this one life that was changed. You see this article that's posted in the Hill, on Capitol Hill, NACP publications, Dallas Morning News. I got a post that our pictures in Dallas Morning News, this story. It's all over. And that's the power of the impact. So I don't know about you, but Scandals, I'm excited about the future. This is the future of Juneteenth, freedom. And that's the point I want to get to. We talked about the past that gave us our freedom in the country. We talked about the present. We're celebrating it. But the future of what Pharrell is doing, this is what the future of Juneteenth looks like, making immediate impact that will give generational change to families to come, black families to come.
That's phenomenal. Physical freedom, emotional freedom, and financial freedom with that student loan debt forgiveness.
Right?
Yes.
You can't ask for anything more. That's the trifecta. That is the trifecta. But once again, look, our time is up. Again, we thank you again for joining us here on State of the Water. We're excited about what's happening in our new season. We're getting ready to finish it up. Almost our second full year. So we're getting ready to start our third full year of State of the Water. We're going to talk about that more next week. But again, we want to thank you for joining us, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. I'd like to thank our producer, DJ Scandalous, again for joining us. And without you, the listener, and your support, we wouldn't be who we are. Until next week, God bless.